So thank you everyone for joining our little session, plotting your career. I have the honor to introduce Mr. Yumas. I want to make sure I'm saying it correctly.
Humans.
Yumas. Okay.
Humans, yes.
Um, he has a lot of experience in the field, a lot of different things. So today we will all be hearing about his advocacy experience and learning from some real scenarios from his career. So if you would want to, oh, and I also, for participants, if whenever you want to like ask a question or anything, you're free to turn on your camera, your microphone. You're also free to just put a question in the chat and I can make sure we address it. But if you would want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Sure. It'd probably be best if I show just a few slides. Um, Give me 1 second. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
You guys see that presentation?
Yep.
Cool. So I just wanted to kind of share my experience in my journey, and we can kind of go into chatting. When I think about my career, I segmented into two buckets or two spaces, and that's the executive leadership and government positions, and also social work. And it's interesting how it's intertwines, and I believe in every aspect of our careers. I think social work is such a vital and important career choice because it's the foundation to so much of what you'll do in the future. As you can see, early on after uh, after college in 2001, I really started my career in social work as a behavioral specialist, and really took positions working in the field, family support and foster care specialist, and really decided to go and get my master's in social work at Howard University in 2008. While getting my master's in social work, I did not want to take a role directly working in the field of social work. So I took a role, and it was my first entry into working in government, working in the Department of Transportation, and while in the District of Columbia, and really learned that if you have the ability to solve problems and look at things holistically, you can really write your own ticket in terms of the things you wanted to do. So I was really able to solve problems. I was interested in solving problems in the government sector. And while working in the Department of Transportation, there's not many customer-facing spaces, but I worked within a department that was customer-facing, meaning I had the ability to interact with the community quite a bit. So that required me to solve a lot of problems on the day-to-day. And so that kind of ballooned into me going to the deputy office of the deputy mayor for planning and economic development. So dealing with a lot of community issues around planning and economic development, real estate development, really springboarded me into spaces like working with DC Water, which allowed me to really engage communities around the importance. There's a water crisis going on. There's the issue of pollution with our water. So it's a lot of this stuff is social work related in so many different ways. So I had a chance to lead a public engagement effort to clean up the Potomac waterways, and then going into Arlington County, where I had a chance to basically lead an effort to take the entire county as it relates to all the business processes from paper to digital platforms. So again, social workers leading the effort to build digital platforms to streamline um, um, standing up businesses, residents really needing to navigate renovations around their homes, working with developers around building bridges and our roads and our right of ways, a lot of different creative and unique things. And from there, I went on to um, the Office of Strategic Excellence back in the District of Columbia, where we were building a digital platform to support some of what the Affordable Care Act kind of executed. So in that act, there was really an effort to streamline the ability for folks to apply for SNAP and TANF. So we were building an eligibility system. So I was leading and directing a team to to move the change effort around hospitals engaging differently around customer service delivery models, and in addition to agencies moving differently. So a lot of times you see folks lining up to get their monthly benefits or the yearly benefits. So we're building a platform where they could do that from the comfort of their home or from their phones. And so I led the change effort to do that. And currently in my role now, I'm with the Gwinnett County Office of Strategic Excellence as an engagement officer, and really going between the county commissioners and county leadership to execute on a lot of political efforts that have been the key to moving Gwinnett County forward. If you guys don't know, Gwinnett County is the seventh most diverse county in the country, right at about a million population. So there's a lot of change going on here, and it's been traditionally a red space, but it flipped blue probably about 2-3 years ago. So there's a lot of change going on. There's a lot of anxiety around those things. So really bringing in my skill set to get those things done. So that's the nut and bolts of my executive and government positions. But as you can see on the right side, my social work stuff was still moving forward. While I was working on my grad degree, I had a chance to do things like work in the White House as a researcher, in the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And then I went out west, and I was a campaign organizer for President Obama in his campaign. And then, while completing my grad degree, I managed a grant for Howard University School of Social Work, where I had the chance to work with men and boys around the country to address domestic violence, sexual assault. So working with the NFL, Major League Baseball, really interesting spaces to do some of this work. And then kind of going into some of the current spaces I am. So I've always maintained two spaces, right? My government work and keeping my social work going as well. But it's intersecting, and the skill sets are so important to kind of doing those things on a day-to-day. And so kind of wanted to show you what are my current responsibilities, and that's my day-to-day as I show up as a strategic engagement officer, and then continue to do some of the social work stuff as a supervised therapist, where I don't have my licensure yet, but I have an opportunity where I'll be sitting for my exams here in the next month, where I'll get to get my test out for my license clinical social work. But just kind of wanted to show you some of those spaces that I've had a chance to kind of engage and share. And some of the key spaces that are important to those things are change management and skills comparison. When you talk about a lot of these things, I'm working with people to get them to change, to think about change, to move things forward and get things done. I think social workers have the absolute, greatest skill set to get some of these things done. And you'll see in arenas where folks are kind of encroaching upon our professional skill set, social entrepreneurs, and a lot of the things that you see in social media, where folks are kind of taking on roles where social workers are actually ideal in moving change forward in so many different ways outside of traditional skill sets and traditional spaces. But social work is absolutely critical to moving things forward, and we carry a lot of these great skills to get things done around the country. And I kind of just wanted to show you those 3 slides and kind of take any questions that you guys may have. So I'll start.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to either unmute yourself, put them in the chat.
I have a question. So how do you market yourself for, like, I'm obviously a student. So like as I'm approaching graduation, like how do you market yourself for some of these positions? Not necessarily the ones that you've, you know, held because they're more upper level, but as you're coming out of school.
Well, that's an interesting question. I market myself, and I really was able to solve problems in a sense. So many times I found that in my government positions, there were issues with moving initiatives forward and solving problems, and most of the problems nestled in people problems, the inability to communicate and work through issues and really identify those things that we learn in our social work spaces from a therapeutic standpoint. So in a sense, you're kind of showing up and solving problems from a people centered approach or a design centered approach, and really taking on those things that kind of move initiatives forward. Um, but really trying to find the sweet spot where you can move those things forward. But in terms of marketing, I've probably after 2000 and when I left the deputy mayor's office of planning and economic development, I really only chose to take really hard jobs. If you can look on the left hand side, the Northeast Boundary Tunnel project, that was a really hard job in terms of engaging the community. When you think about putting scientists, water scientists, when you think about putting engineers and architects in a room and talk about how can we move this project forward without being a nuisance to the community, because it was 7 different sites that had to be constructed throughout the District of Columbia, in addition to drilling under the White House. So really helping folks, you know, embrace the space of listening and understanding the needs of the community, which is not a traditional approach when we think about many of these projects, because they are essential services in a lot of ways. So really figuring out how to move projects forward in those senses is how I've been able to market myself.
I do have a question, um, because I can see that you've done a lot of different work. Um, and as social workers, like you were saying, we're very multifaceted. Um, is there any trajectory you would say that you followed, or did you just kind of see where you were needed as a social worker, where you felt like you could best serve your community? How did you go about finding all these different positions?
Yeah, right. So currently, right now, my day to day, I am a strategic engagement officer. One of my primary responsibilities is diversity, equity, and inclusion work in a community that has traditionally not been interested in talking about that type of work. So as a social worker, I know I can't lead with um, notes that kind of reflect highlighting racism or the issue of racism here in the county. So I have to figure out how can I have this conversation without having this conversation, right? And so creating initiatives and thoughtful strategies to get the things moving forward. So I was able to put a retreat together with county commissioners and all the county leaderships and put them all in one room to really understand what diversity, equity, inclusion means for a county that's been voting for 100 years Republican, that's now suddenly voting Democrat, right? And so that requires us to partner with universities, and here locally, that's a University of Georgia, and really putting the onus back on political leaders to kind of think through some of these political hot button topics and say, hey, you ran on this platform. How do we solve these problems, right? What is the actual voice in solving these problems in the day to day business? What does this mean for the community and the folks who do this work on the day to day? So really, really thinking through how to solve problems and being critical in our thinking and using our social work skill sets to solve some of these problems. Because sometimes it's not about being agitators, it's about being creators and being thoughtful in the approaches that we take. And that's how I've been able to kind of move things forward, um, in identifying different platforms and spaces to get things done. Because the tables that have been created for us to pull up and impact change are not often tables suited for true change, right? They are still tables structured in a lot of those white supremacy and a lot of those of these things that are oppressive in nature. So we really have to think through, what does the new table look like? You know, how do we build a new table to create change and have these conversations that really, really speak to some of the things that we're struggling with getting some of these things done. So yeah, I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
So really, in a nutshell, when you think about social work, it's, I like to think about it in a sense that, putting social workers in front of the problems instead of behind the problems. When I was with the Department of Transportation, I had a chance to lead the effort around, city planning, right? You know, what does it mean to lay out a city in the planning and zoning office? It's traditionally done from an architectural standpoint. It's traditionally done from a real estate standpoint. But when you add social work into that equation, where do you put hospitals? Where do you put the ADA stuff? Where do you put the roadways? Where do you put things that are important for the communities to access, to be more viable and to be more healthy? That could be grocery stores around planning economic development. So really, really thinking through how we can impact some of these spaces, and really having social workers think about how they can build cities to be more helpful. When you think about a housing project, right? How can we change that housing project into a unit that's a healthy space for the community versus a lot of the things that are stigmatized around housing projects, right? And just really, really finding spaces to kind of get things done and think about those things creatively.
Another thing is you were talking a lot about how you approach things as solving problems. Was there ever a point in any of your experiences where there was a problem that you were having a lot of difficulty trying to figure out how to approach it in the most effective way? And kind of going with that, how did you eventually find a way to work through that?
Yeah, I'll go back to another responsibility I'm tasked with doing is performing serving on a steering committee here in Gwinnett County as part of a needs assessment. Um, this county hasn't done a needs assessment since 1991, and basically a needs assessment determines the need of the community in terms of the services, the programming. It could be healthcare programming, it could be, nonprofits, it could be, anything as it relates to folks getting their needs met. So there is a rift in terms of how different departments engage the community, right? There's a historical approach to engaging the community, and there is a new approach to engaging the community. And when you're talking about doing a needs assessment, you have to engage about 13 different departments that are tasked with engaging the community to get them to move collectively forward or come to a solution to move collectively forward to engage the community to arrive at solutions. Um, so really, really, one of the things that I had a chance to do is kind of put forth some ideas to build an engagement model that we can all agree to engage the community, to agree to kind of solve some of these problems. Um, and it's really, really, you know, moving away from folks kind of, you know, wanting to maintain their islands around power and control. Because when you think about a lot of these local government spaces, they've been, you know, people have held positions for like 20, 30 years, and they are traditionally used to doing things a certain way. So really, really getting folks to think about, you know, how we can approach change differently. And, you know, I know you guys have been talking about policy a lot, but like, what does this mean at the local level, right? And the day to day in the trenches of getting this stuff done, where, because that's where it really truly happens and where it's really impacting our community at the local level. And so really, really identifying what that means at the local level. And that's connecting with leaders here to work together and move away to some of these siloed approaches to providing services to our communities.
Thank you. I think you bring up a really good point of we talk a lot about the macro versus the micro, but we forget about that meso level that connects the two.
Well, yeah, before I went into getting my master's, I was definitely more working in the community, you know, working as a IFE provider, kind of like an entry level counselor. And after getting my master's, I really saw that, you know, the people that we're serving still have to go back into those communities, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really, really hard for them to like change and maintain the change if those systems still oppress and kind of keep them in these spaces where they can't truly change. So we got to kind of build the spaces where they can actually grow and foster change. And we got to continue to kind of help them from a mental health standpoint to grow and change. So it's twofold. We have to create those spaces where change can flourish, and we've also got to continue to work with our communities to create healthy spaces for them to change and become whole. I think somebody's talking. Okay.
I saw you unmuted yourself, but we still can't hear you. While she figures that out, there is a question in the, or she's back.
Okay. Sorry. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you for that, Mr. Lavar. If you could expand a little bit more about your experiences providing direct services, because that's something that I'm doing, but I'm doing that so that I can get my clinical hours, get my licensure. But I also have an interest in policy and advocacy work as well. And I know that there are Congress individual people that belong in Congress or part of Congress, that there are licensed clinical social workers that that could happen. But in your experience, you know, is that even, you know, I know that sounds ideal, but is that even possible to be working directly as well as working on a federal or a community advocacy level? And then my other question too is like, maybe you could expand a little bit more about your experiences as working directly with the population.
Yeah. Like I said, my day to day, I work for the county, right? And then when I went home, I was like, hey, I wanted to continue to do some work. So I kind of volunteered in some spaces, and I was able to identify and you know, get a part-time job with the agency here that provides therapeutic services for communities here in Gwinnett County and actually in the Atlanta region. So the service provider provides an opportunity. If you have an interest, if you have MSW, they will hire you to provide supervised therapy services until you get your license, right? After finishing grad school, I never went back to get my license because I was doing the government thing. I was really moving pretty fast throughout my career, so I never took time So one of the long-term goals is actually to get my licensure, and I sit for the test in the next month or so. But this agency allows you to provide supervised therapy where I have to report to a psychiatrist and a lead psychologist, and I have a caseload of I have a part-time caseload, like 10 kids that provide counseling to, right? So each session, I have a session and I have to write notes. It's pretty detailed notes. And then I have supervision once a month with the folks, and really helping me gear up and sit for the test in the next month. So that's what I've been doing in the part time in preparation of what I envision long term when I move away from my government stuff, and that's a comprehensive agency that I want to stand up, right? That goes back to the stuff that I've been talking about, building communities, right, and building people, right, collectively moving them forward. So and really just putting my ideas and my experiences together, because I think they go hand in hand. We can't write policy. I mean, we can write policy, but if we haven't created the environment for those policies to flourish, it's not going to happen. If we can write policy to create change in the lives of people, but we haven't created the space for them to actually to flourish, it really doesn't work. And one of the things that I go back to is the DEI work that I'm having a chance to be a part of here, right? And that's really challenging the capitalistic, white supremacist model that is in place, and it's going to maintain that sense of power and oppression. So my question is, what is the replacement to that conversation? What is the replacement to that? What's the model that moves us forward? And there's a book called Being Black and Being Buddhist, Black in Buddhism. It really creates a model for us to move forward and have some of these holistic conversations of health and healing, not just for Black, but for all people, whites and Blacks, but really creating a space that's comprehensive, that's whole, and really thinking outside of the box, because I think there's so many different opportunities where change is happening around us, but we're really trying to replicate the process that has not worked and is not working. And so we have to come up with unique solutions. And I think as social workers, we have the skill sets to write policy, and we have the skill sets to work with people on a day-to-day and moving forward to these spaces of change and progress. And I think that's the harnessing power and the wonderful powers of being a social worker, and learning those skill sets, and really honing those skill sets to find that thing that you want to do. And my career journey has been unique and different in a lot of different ways, and I've had a lot of great mentors along the way. Dr. Lewis, a few other professors from Howard University School of Social Work, and a lot of other great professors and minds around the country. And even in some senses, I've reached out to thought leaders and thinkers and written them letters to say, hey, I got a theory, I got an idea that may be helpful to enhance in our community, that may impact policy at the human level first, and then push up to the policy level. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think for me, I took about a year to really think about my career and really connect the dots, right? And say every opportunity is a learning opportunity, and it sets you up for the next opportunity. And I think that's one of the most important things that I took away. Every awesome opportunity created a space where I was able to learn and grow and identify how I could offer more to help in my community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That answers both questions. Thank you.
We have a question in the chat from Emily. She said, how would you advise us starting out in the workforce to find these opportunities and work in these spaces relating to marketing yourself?
Well, Emily, I would really say, why did you choose social work, right? Why did you choose to go into social work? And for me, I chose to go into social work because I'm about 6'5", and I always like to stand up to bullies. And I don't like folks to be picked on. So I'm always wanting to solve problems and always protect those who can't protect themselves. And so I kind of took that synergy to kind of create spaces where I could be a help to my community, and in some senses, create spaces where I could protect my community. So I would say you probably have to spend some time and say, how do you show up around the work? What are your aspirations around the work? Because social work is really limitless in what you can do and the opportunities that's available. Um, you have tons of social entrepreneurs on Instagram and on Facebook, and gurus are really encroaching upon the things we learn at the graduate level and the PhD level. That really social workers are more equipped and better equipped to do and say, and that's building digital platforms. I'm actually a board member of it's called CivWorks. And when I was a campaign organizer out in Nevada, I met, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Oracle, but I was organizing a ride, and one of the folks on the ride was an executive of Oracle. And after the campaign, he approached me. He's like, "Hey, I want to stay in touch with you, blah, blah, blah." So, some years later, when Trump went into office, the same gentleman who was an Oracle executive, he wrote an open letter to the Washington Post. You can look it up. And he basically told Trump why he was not going to build a platform or a database to track immigrants. So, but Oracle decided to do it, but he resigned. And so after resigning, he said, I'm going to build a platform that's going to be a platform that's not going to have a lot of these things that are impacted by social opinion, but really just creating spaces where people can change. It's called CivWorks. But just creating spaces where you're always approachable and you're always thoughtful. I think when I opened up, I said I was from the South, and that's important to me, and I think that's important for each of us. We tap into those things that make us who we are, and that really gives us a life to our path to what we're trying to accomplish. I would encourage you to be, an advocate of reading and learning from various professions. It could be, I've learned from engineers, I've learned from scientists, I've learned from like-minded social workers, I've learned from our data folks, I've learned from IT folks. So just really, really, learning and growing. There's a saying that, if you find an issue that has a billion problems and you solve it, right? You become a billionaire because you solve the issue. But that's the thing where social workers can't create spaces where they can support themselves or they're struggling. And that's not the case either. I just think there's just so many opportunities that you can really, really create for yourself. But I would encourage you, Emily, to kind of sit with, um, you know, figuring out why you chose social work and what can you bring to the field of social work. And it really happened for me when I said, hey, you know, instead of asking the world what it could do for me, I was like, hey, what can I do for the world? What can I do for the environment that can leave it a better place? And that's really that's a dharma approach in how you think and move in the world.
We have another question. Says, you mentioned a community needs assessment and the beginning there to address the gaps. Are there areas in macro systems that you have seen have continued to be neglected where social workers should begin to give attention to?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So I went back to, this county, the county work in engaging in the traditional space of engaging, right? And inviting the same voices to the space, right? And it's interesting, the same issues are identified because we did breakout sessions, and it always came down to transportation, um, workforce, housing, jobs, and I think it was food desert. It was another one, but I was also participating in another committee that had some of the same folks showing up to the same sessions, right? And what I saw quickly is that, for us to get to some solutions that are healthy for our communities, we have to rethink how we engage and who we invite to the table, right? Because traditionally, those that are most in need, those that we're providing services to, are the ones that are actually forgotten to be engaged. So there was really some discomfort for executive leadership to say, hey, let's go into some of our poor communities and really create spaces where we just listen, right? And as a social worker, I was really able to take my social work skill sets and create spaces that were non-intrusive and that allow folks to kind of show up as they are and share their concerns. Um, I don't know if you remember, but there was an initiative to lock up illegal immigrants here in America. And here, there was a whole campaign about it. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And when I started working here, I learned quickly that, no one advertised that campaign stopped here. So in these sessions, you never had Latino folks showing up to these sessions. So when I talked to my Latino brothers and sisters, it was like, hey, can we actually go to government sessions and talk about our problems? Is there an issue? But they were like, wow, that's why they're not coming. That's why they're not talking to us. It's like, yeah, because they don't feel comfortable, but that's the type of stuff, when you look at it from a macro, micro level, from a human centered space, um, and find those unique nuances to help leadership, inform leadership to rethink how they create spaces or where they haven't created spaces that creates opportunity for change. But most importantly, helping leadership become comfortable with changing, because there is a space, when you talk about folks who've been in power for 20 plus years, they feel because, I have to kind of reset the table of power. Does that mean I become powerless? And so, negotiating conversations like that from a social work perspective has been vital for me to kind of get things done, where folks, everyone at the table feels empowered, because empowering that impoverished person empowers that person who's also been at the table for 20 years. They just don't understand how it empowers them. So I hope I'm making sense in that response. So I would encourage, I don't know where you guys are at in your career as social workers, um, but as I showed you on the slide, I've worked with NFL teams. I've worked with Major League Baseball teams. I've worked with county executives. I've worked with local organizations. I've worked with national organizations. And I really think that social work is the absolute best thing you can do for your career. Um, as if I would have went back and did it all over again, I probably would have. I would have did my MSW, and I would consider doing an MBA or a something in public administration, right? Because that's in a sense what I'm doing now. One of my end goals is to stand up my own practice and also, be a city or town administrator one day. Where I'm actually, looking at how to get these things done from a social work perspective, because that's what all of my work is grounded in. It's grounded in the key principles that I learned at Howard University School of Social Work, and that's looking at things comprehensively and creating spaces where folks can show up and be okay with change. Looks like there's another question. When you're working in the micro realm, what strategies did you keep up to date and in touch with the everyday person and their problems? I think things easy to get siloed off into the. So I think at the macro level, every realm is different. In my current role, or every role, I spend about 90 days, and there's a series of things that I do, and most of what I do, I listen, and I set meetings with leadership, and I set meetings with those folks who are leaders but are not leaders, right? So that's the thing. You got to identify folks who impact change that are not in leadership positions, but they drive change within organizations. And I learned that in transportation when I was assigned to work with someone who was within transportation for like 30 years, and she knew everything. She saw leaders come, she saw them go. And what she taught me was that there are about 5 things that make these agencies stay relevant and stay vibrant. And she taught me those 5 things. But it's centered around engaging um, folks at the ground level to get things done. Because at the very top, it's very transient. Ideas come and go. But what are those things that are critical to the day to day? And that's unique and different for every realm. And you have to figure out what those things are for each space that you enter into. Because if not, you will perpetuate those silos, and change is very difficult when you can't get folks to kind of move out some of those silo approaches to change.
I have a question. I I identify as an abolitionist, and I noticed quickly that a lot of the work that we're expected to do as social workers actually perpetuates like harmful systems and oppressive systems. And so I'm wondering if it's even possible, like at this point, because, um, or I guess if there's any thoughts on your end as far as like how to get paid a living wage to be in this abolition social work, because I'm noticing a lot of it is having to do with me taking my own time out of my internship to do this advocacy work or to do this community organizing work, and I'm not getting paid to do it. So yeah, I'm just wondering if you had any ideas there.
No, that's a great idea. Um, have you noticed how many social entrepreneurs that's on Instagram and social media that say, "Hey, I got to answer to everybody's problem," right? And I love to listen to them, but after I listen to them, I really like try to understand what's the framework that they're working from. And really, they don't have a framework. They're just seizing an opportunity to take advantage of you know the learning curve that's in everything called change, right? There's a learning curve. And for me, I'm a big proponent of finding models and identifying models of change. And I think I might have mentioned it earlier. All this work that we're doing and we're talking about, if we don't create a new model, we're just perpetuating white supremacy. We're just perpetuating capitalism. We're just perpetuating so many of the things that have been oppressive to to so much of the work that we're doing. So really, I would encourage you to think about your own framework, right? When I said reading, this cool book. I've been digesting it for about 2 months now. You can see it's all kind of banged up, but it's called Black and Buddhist. But it's really about, it's not just about Black folks. It's about everybody. And it's not just about Buddhists. It's they're practitioners from Judaism, Christianity. It's in this book. They're talking about, if there is no more oppression, if there is no white supremacy, what model do we operate and function in? What model do we write policy on? Right? And it's such an interesting thought, because I just see so many opportunity to move in a positive light in this world, because right now things are so tough, things are really dark, and there's just so many spaces where you can create and think through things. I would encourage you to kind of think about those problems or your interests. Start with your interests first, and come up with solutions. Create your own niche. Don't try to fit in. Don't try. I would encourage, don't try to fit in. Um, and stay confident. Stay encouraged. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a room and put forth a presentation that's fundamentally grounded in my social work stuff, but I'm speaking to executives that are talking about, planning a city. you know, everything goes back to the needs of the most vulnerable populations, right? And encouraging spaces where people can share their power, and share the space of change. So don't try to fit in, because this the model that we supposed to work within. It ain't it. It's a reason why. It's a reason why things haven't moved forward, and brilliant people like Martin Luther King and so many other brilliant minds. You know, there's a reason why they couldn't move this stuff forward, right? It's time. The different people in power, and I'm not Martin Luther King, but I really think we can't move things forward if we don't think about and identify models that are healthy and whole. And I think social workers are equipped to do that. One of the hobbies that I'm doing is, if I had the revenue, how would I build a city from a social work perspective? How would I build a community from a social work perspective? What's the most important thing? What's the first thing that needs to be done when I build my infrastructure? How do I keep the water healthy? Where's the trash? A lot of these things are associated with environment, so environmental social work stuff. A lot of these things are associated with workforce development, housing, but not just housing. How do we create spaces where people are progressing through their lives, right? They're not maintaining in these same spaces. They're getting opportunities to grow and have a true bite at progress and a true bite at some sense of wealth and opportunity. So, yeah.
Thank you. We're all having I think these are really great conversations that are happening. And I would encourage everyone to network with each other, get each other's contact information, continue having these conversations after today. Your advocacy, it doesn't stop after Student Advocacy Day. But with that, I want to keep in mind respecting everyone's time. Our time is wrapping up for our advocacy breakout. Thank you so much, Mr. Lavar, for sharing all your experiences with us and answering our questions. Our Our next breakout sessions, I believe, is our social policy lectures, which start at 3. So take your time heading over there. If you want to stay here, get each other's contact information, ask any last questions before heading over. But thank you guys all for a great breakout session.
Good luck, guys.